they start to cause any more havoc, Suze.
Yeah, let me just point out, too, when you hear these tough words out of the U.S. attorney basically saying, you think you got away with something, you did not get away with anything. And there's so much video out now. People who live stream, people who take pictures and videos on their phones and then post to social media, or in this situation where you've got Skyfox over downtown L.A. And so are those agents behind that gate that you're seeing there? So it's a very similar scene that
yes,
we had seen earlier today.
Yeah, Susan, this is almost like tear gas 2.0. They're standing there ready to come out again, I think, if these agitators, if they come out wider, you can see them here in the bottom of frame there. So that's all the federal agents there behind the gate there. They will just lift up that gate and come out. And as to talk about Bill Escalation, I think nobody can deny making the borders stronger, but nobody likes to see people who families are rounded up, taxpayers and good citizens who aren't breaking the law. We heard about that we're going to round up gang members and send them back to where they came from. So let's hope that we can sort of sort that out, because it's not a good thing for our society, Suze.
Yes, indeed. And I should just point out that Laura Diaz talked to a number of people that she called more onlookers than protesters, who said pretty much the same thing, that they felt as if that the targets were just law-abiding, granted, undocumented immigrants who were just trying to feed their families and trying to make a life for themselves in this country. All right, so Laura Diaz, you're downstairs and you're on the ground. You're closer to the federal building than just American National Museum and the Contemporary Museum, but you're a little farther away from that. Due north?
Yeah, we're at Alameda and Temple, and from where I'm standing, it's very quiet, Susan. Really, there's not much going on. I know I heard Justin mention that he could see some agitators at this late hour on the other side, but I'm not able to see it from this vantage point, and it's not very easy for us to break down and leave. But I can tell you this, as you know, I've been around several areas of Southern California today. I was in Paramount earlier today, one of the areas that you talked about where they had problems, and we were not far from that Home Depot. We're going to go now to some video that was shot earlier today here in downtown. Michael Horowitz was in downtown. He shot it on his cell phone. He was standing right there when the scene changed dramatically, when all of a sudden those federal officers started firing tear gas. Now in the crowd were the protesters as well as media. So media was rushing away, as well as those protesters trying to get out, choking back from having that tear gas let out there. So that was one of the scenes that happened here earlier this evening. But for the time that I've been here, it's actually been very subdued. When we first arrived, there was action as the LAPD came in and said to the protesters, you got to get out of here. That was the order to disperse that happened at about 9 o'clock. So since then, we've watched as the scene has become calmer and calmer. We had the LAPD here earlier. They have since pretty much left the scene, and now it's just a few of us here standing on this street corner. Occasionally somebody will go by in a car and hit the horn, or once in a while they'll yell an obscenity, but for the most part, it's pretty quiet. It's just the sound of choppers, like what you hear overhead right now, or people just here taking in the scene. I wouldn't even call them protesters. They're either observers or somebody who just wants to see what's going on, or maybe post on social media. That's the latest here in downtown Los Angeles. Sending it back to you, Susan.
View that Laura is giving us is probably not very persuasive for Donald Trump, who has ordered in 2,000 California National Guard into the area, basically saying if the local authorities and the state will not take care of the situation, calm things down, make sure that there is no more destruction, then he will, by bringing in the 2,000 National Guard. And And Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth also says that he's put on high alert a number of active duty Marines at Camp Pendleton. So if things continue past the second day of protest, that's the threat or the promise that comes from the Secretary of Defense. All right, now we want to show you something that happened earlier, and that has to do with the fact that when the tensions erupted near the Home Depot in Paramount, Matthew Seedorf was out there. He was covering the protest, and that's when people used cinder blocks to break into our news vehicle. Take a look.
This is a brand new news truck that we just got. Looks like the tires were slashed. They busted into the windows.
Indeed, if you look at the video there, Matthew is showing off the fact that they used cinder blocks to get into the vehicle. They broke all the windows. They stole the equipment, and Matthew was sort of gracious by suggesting that perhaps this plain car, brand new but dark SUV, was mistaken as a federal vehicle. Regardless, that is the end result of a brand new vehicle that was used by Fox 11's news crew there. All right, we're going to go back upstairs to Justin O'Brien. It looks like at least that group is on the move.
Yeah, that's right, Suze. They're on the move. They're actually heading north up Alameda towards the detention center. So they're going to join that group who's already in front there. So we might see another showdown before long. Those group that's walking up Alameda, they are armed with those pieces of concrete that I was talking about, and we've already seen a couple of rocks or something thrown back towards the gates. So when we really thought that things were cooling off here, it looks like it's just a bit of a intermission, because I think it's going to be before long that LAPD or the Homeland Security officers are going to have to come out here and deal with these guys.
All right, we just saw a little peek of where Laura Diaz is and that same group walking back behind them. And so what a difference a couple of minutes makes, Laura. You were saying peaceful and the only people around you were perhaps just sort of checking out the scene. But now I see people walking behind you. They look like they mean business.
Well, you know, they're still not moving at a very fast clip, but I would say there are about 60 people now. I would assume that they were part of that original group, and they are now walking up the street. They are headed up Alameda, just crossing over Temple, and we'll see where they end up, maybe back where they started. So far, it's been pretty peaceful. I know that Justin had mentioned that some of them were carrying bricks or some other kind of material, maybe rocks that they could throw. From my vantage point, I don't see anybody carrying anything. There are a few people, I even thought I saw a few kids in the crowd, but they're just walking up the street. What their ultimate intention is, I don't know. But so far, they're just using this as a thoroughfare to go north, and we'll see where they end up and what they do next.
Indeed, but it is after 11 o'clock in the evening. I don't think it's typical to see that many people walking around downtown Los Angeles and not be near.
No, not where we are.
Yeah, not be near like some tourist area or LA Live or something like that. So when you see a group like that, and we know what the activities were earlier in the day, it's hard not to think that perhaps they were a part of the activity that occurred earlier, that they're part of a group that could be characterized as protesters or demonstrators. And so that's why we do want to keep an eye. Are you seeing or hearing anything that suggests the LAPD is coming back out?
I don't see any black and whites yet. I wasn't suggesting that they weren't part of the protest group. I was saying that so far I don't see any indication that they're doing anything violent. But keep in mind, the order to disperse was given at 9 o'clock, so they already know they're not supposed to be here, right? So if they're part of that initial group and they're coming back into the area, they've already been told to leave. As you mentioned, it's getting late. People have been told not to come back into the area, so I assume that in a short while we'll see some black and whites coming back. But so far, it's just a couple of members of the media and now these people who are traveling on foot and who are headed back towards the Roybal building. But that is really the latest here, except for a chopper above us. And that's the scene here at Alameda and Temple.
All right, well, Laura, call me circumspect, but when you start to see people who are walking along on a downtown street and they're covering their face, like that gentleman right there, it sort of is suggestive that he does not want his identity to be too easily recognized. We're past COVID, people. There's really no reason to be wearing a face covering like that unless it's because you fear tear gas or you fear identification. So we're going to keep an eye on this. We're going to move on. We want to show you what's going on from the perspective of Sky Fox. How many people do you think we're talking about now as they become closer to the original group that you had pointed out, Justin? So where Laura is, there was a fairly good group of people leaving. Oh, what's that? So these are federal agents. They're sending out a flashbang as a warning, or tear gas as a warning. Stop this amassing with this situation. Yeah, this is interesting, and it is enough to disperse the crowd. Justin?
Yeah, that's enough. They had enough of it. The crowd, as we said, had pieces of concrete, and they started throwing it at the gates there. They don't want to see the scene that they had earlier, where they came right up close to the gates or the entrance to the garage there. So they're pushing them back. There's a flashbang coming out there. I'm not sure if that's a tear gas canister or what that is, but they're certainly trying to keep them off the property and onto the street. LAPD are talking about coming back here and blocking the entrances where a temple and where the freeway is, to try and take all these people into custody. So let's see if they have the stamina for that. We don't normally see them take large groups of agitators like this into custody, but I would estimate the crowd to be at around about 80 to 100. So they certainly need to get here quickly to take them into custody.
I told them it's all in the wrist. They want me to miss, but that's a wish.
So they're going to certainly keep their distance now from the entrance to the garages, Susan.
Yeah, indeed. And you see that high-powered flashlight. So the agents are using that light. That's also an intimidation tactic when you've got that bright light in your eyes. And then we're watching these agents as they stay behind that gate. They're pretty far away from the street. And the people now, they're not in the direct contact of where, if you're throwing tear gas canisters or flashbangs, but they seem to be under that tree, so a little bit, excuse me, away from a direct kind of aim, if you will, by those federal agents, by the Border Patrol, or whomever it is behind those gates. And as we continue to watch the number of people, I do see a couple members of the media that are, trying to take pictures, but now these agents are coming out. I see at least one guy with his gun drawn. What do you suppose they're trying to do? And more tear gas or more flashbangs?
They're just trying to keep them away from the entrance here, I think. And unfortunately, or for them, they're firing them this way, but the wind is blowing to the north. So they can fire it as much as they like to the south, but it's not going to have too much effect, unfortunately, because the wind is blowing the tear gas back onto the officers. You see a guy there kicking that canister back down the road. So you've got to remember that I'm not sure if you'd call these guys protesters. They're more anarchists having a bit of a time out here tonight. I know LAPD are motivating or moving to try and get here to try and take these guys into custody, but that's yet to be seen whether they can get back here quick enough. I am a little surprised that the Homeland Security officers have acted the way they are. I would have potentially thought they would have let the group get larger and to make them more easier to take into custody. Maybe the two, as we know, they're not supposed to be talking to each other, the Homeland Security wise as well as LAPD. So they're definitely not on the same page there. The air, they're just filled with tear gas. All those officers obviously have gas masks on so they can stay in that area. And you've got to remember, these are probably just people driving down Alameda tonight. They didn't ask to be involved in this. But these protesters, as I said, about 80 to 100 of them appear to be just standing here, even making their way back towards Temple. So no sign of going home, Suze.
Yeah, Justin, I want you to be careful because there is quite a bit of graffiti on the walls there, some of it obscene, some of it we're not allowed to show on the news. But also, when you can get a look at the gates where those federal agents were as they were peeking out outside of the gate, you can see that there was graffiti. There's graffiti on the gates as well. So you know that those demonstrators did make it to the point where they were able to mark up that building. That would most likely be what Bill Escalation calls destruction, damage, and where he elicits the promise that these people will be found and they will be prosecuted by the FBI. So the federal agents from that building, from that federal building, were successful in getting the crowd to move away. So they were starting to amass. They were starting to gather in great numbers. But thanks to tear gas or flashbangs and that high-powered light, they are now moving away. We don't see LAPD, though, right? No LAPD as yet to kind of assist. And you're right that LAPD and ICE, they are not working in coordination. But LAPD has promised to keep the city safe and to keep the peace in the streets of the city of Los Angeles. All right, Laura Diaz. Laura Diaz, you said it much more eloquently than I, what the responsibility is for LAPD versus ICE and how they are going to work together. Laura, what are you seeing now?
Okay, so it's been very quiet here in terms of police until like 30 seconds ago. The black and whites coming in with lights and sirens, trying to contain the area. As you know, we heard and saw just a few moments ago that some of what I presume were protesters came back into the area, and the federal officers were trying to get them to disperse, and that's when the tear gas was fired again. So now you see people leaving the area, but the LAPD here to try to restore quiet and peace, but they were gone for about the last 20 minutes, suddenly arriving here back at Temple and Alameda. So they're doing what we discussed earlier, Susan, which is to keep peace, not an arm of immigration, but here to make sure that the community of Southern California here in Los Angeles, the city, is safe. So they have arrived on the scene here now. People have dispersed, and it's now, you can basically feel the temperature lowering as they're containing the area. But it was really quite odd because when some of this first started, as you can see behind me, regular traffic is going through this intersection. Just people, I don't know if they're looky-loos or they're people who think they have business here in downtown Los Angeles, but there is no one doing traffic control. Now that the black and whites are here, they will prohibit motorists from getting north of Temple. But up until not that long ago, you could have driven through this intersection, which was quite remarkable, thinking what was going on not that far away. So this is the scene out here. It's chaotic. It was quiet about 30 minutes ago. You know, we were live and it was pretty serene. That's how quickly things can change. And I think a lot of this has to do with social media. People post, they tell you where the action is, and then other people show up. A lot of this, it's, you know, you and I grew up in a time where people talked on the phone, but now if you want to get the word out, it's very easy. You just post onto social media and you can get a crowd together in not that long amount of time. And I think that's a lot of what we're experiencing through what's happening here in LA right now.
All right, Laura, thank you. Going back up to Skyfox, because, Justin, you can see that the police arrived, and these people who were heading towards the federal building, they're now running from police. Do you see any suggestion that police are serious about catching up to them? What's going on here?
Yeah, Susan, they're very, very serious about trying to catch up to them. As we said, what they tried to do is they tried to corral them there. They came in off the freeway and Temple. They pushed them up into almost like cattle, tried to corral them to take them under arrest. You've got these protesters here. They're climbing up over this wall here. Get this. Now they're on the train tracks and they're trapped. So not only is it dangerous that the train could come along and hit them, LAPD is working out now how to deal with it. You've got about 40 to 50 people running on the train tracks trying to get away from police. And these guys here, maybe they're going to surrender. A lot of these people, as I said before, probably be just onlookers that were saying, hey, let's go and check this out tonight. So it looks like they're going to be taken into custody here. Police want to take everyone into custody, and unclear whether these people are going to be able to get back off the train tracks. I think there is an exit here where they can, where you actually get onto the train. No, you don't. You actually go down underneath, and I think that takes you to Union Station. That's very, very dangerous.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is discomforting to see all of those people. Do they have to worry about the third rail, or is that just a subway thing in New York?
I'm not sure. I think actually, I know when people do pass away under the tracks, stories have covered, they do de-energize the tracks before they allow the first responders to go down there. So I could tell you I would not be running along those tracks. You don't want to take a chance, but you have these people here that are trying to talk their way out. But I think from the way LAPD are talking, they're going to take all these people into custody tonight. They don't want them, they really want to quieten down the streets here.
Yeah.
So just a really quick, dramatic turn of events, Suze.
Absolutely. It was quite remarkable because there were some people that were just sort of hanging around, and because they weren't feeling, I guess, in need of, they didn't have to run. They didn't feel like they had to run. They thought they were just onlookers. So it was a surreal situation to see these black and whites pull up, the officers bolt out of the cars and then run after some of the protesters. But meantime, there were still people on the corner going, what's going on? I'm not in that group, so I'm just going to stay back. So does it look as if in that little group there, are they on the other side of the fence? Are police there? What's going on? What are you looking at? What are you over?
Yeah, so it's the same spot. I'm just trying to give us a bit of a different angle. Now, that wall is probably about 8 feet high. It's a concrete wall. I've parked my vehicle there many times covering stories, and they're helping each other up over that wall. And as we said, they're running here along the tracks. Now, I'm unsure where that comes. I think that actually runs into, that's a metro track, I think, and it runs into Union Station. So here we are. We certainly need to alert Metro or Amtrak, let them know there are people on the lines, because that's very, very dangerous. Certainly they've got to come out somewhere. LAPD, they rushed in here. They don't seem to be moving to make any arrests at this stage. All they're doing is creating the skirmish line there, maybe waiting for more numbers. But certainly they wanted it to these guys to disperse, but I didn't think they would have this type of effect. This is really odd, Suze. I've never seen anything like this.
Indeed. Yeah, and those trains, the metro trains, the metro rail operates to midnight. We're about a half an hour or so until that time period when they stop down. But meantime, that rail line, which would be, I believe, the Little Tokyo station, but it's going under the street there and could wind up, they're actually moving away from Union Station, are they not? Justin, do I have my directions correct?
Yes, that's correct. I apologize, my mistake there. So yeah, they are moving, so they're moving southbound along Alameda. I'm unsure what line that is, but certainly they're below the ground there. And no, I think there is a little, you're correct, the Little Tokyo station, I think, is down here below us. Mm-hmm. So they're going to come out somewhere, but certainly just dangerous, because you just don't know whether there's electricity, anything's live down there, as well as a train. You know, a train that can't just stop. But it certainly had a major effect out here. It's cleared the street. You can see the federal agents have come out. They're all just standing around now, and the crowd has dispersed.
Yeah, they have. Meantime, lots of LAPD in the area. You mentioned that they set back up the skirmish line. Right there, there's no skirmish line, but there certainly were a lot of people that decided to leave the area and then take some oh, there's the skirmish line. So some questionable maneuvers by the demonstrators, if that's what you want to call them. But the people that were here in front of or behind the federal building, and once they were told to disperse and they didn't, that's when the federal agents decided to come out of the building and make their point known with tear gas and flashbangs. Very quickly, the gas has dispersed, I suppose, because there's enough of a breeze to push it northward. You were pointing that out, that even though the protesters were mostly to the south, the gas was migrating, if you will, to the north. So we've got two skirmish lines set up in this area. And a lot of new graffiti I've noticed on the walls. I'm sorry, producer Producer Brooke say again? Okay, well, let's go back down to Laura Diaz on the ground. Go ahead, Laura.
You can see the large assembly of those black and whites, LAPD, right there at the corner of Temple and Alameda. About 20 people are milling about close to us. Some of them have described themselves as protesters. They said that when they got up there, it started out pretty calmly, and then all of a sudden, you know, there were the flashbangs and the tear gas. But right now, people are just kind of milling about, and there is traffic. If we pan off there, Elliot, you can see that there are people just in their cars going through this intersection. Again, I don't know if they're coming down here to check out the action or if they're really not in tune with what's happening and just driving through the area, but it all strikes me as rather odd. We do see a lot of young people walking by, and most of them don't want to talk to me. A few of them had said that they might tell me why they were here, but then when it came time to go on camera, they decided that wasn't a good idea. But in terms of the level of tension now, I would say it's about half of where it was when we talked to you a little bit earlier, and it's not as calm as it was when I talked to you before that. So it just kind of ebbs and flows. People are still milling about. I think the great majority of them are coming here just to check out the scene. Some of them might have been a part of that initial protest. Once again, though, Susan, getting back to social media and just the word gets out, go there, that's what's happening, and people show up, and some of them will roll video on it or, you know, just be reporting live. They all want to be part of the activity, but that's what I can see from my vantage point right now. It's noisy, but it's somewhat peaceful. Sending it back to you.
Yes, indeed. We watched a couple of people go behind you while you were reporting for us, Laura, and one of them had a gimbal and another one had like a selfie stick kind of situation. So you're absolutely right. They were likely going live and broadcasting out a lot of their images. Now, that scene where Laura is and what Justin has been showing you earlier today, the tensions erupted near a Home Depot in Paramount, and the protesters clashed violently with the Border Patrol agents. Here's Fox 11's Matthew Seedorf.
A violent clash in Paramount. Protesters face to face with Border Patrol agents. One side hurling rocks and bottles, the other firing back with pepper spray and rubber bullets. Sources tell Fox 11 Border Patrol agents Saturday morning were here across the street from Home Depot for a staging area, possibly prepping for an immigration raid. Protesters then moved in.
If you think this is getting out of hand, I'll control everybody right now.
Local officials speaking with demonstrators.
These are hard-working community members. People are average. That's why I'm here. Because we have to protect community and make sure they have rights like anybody else.
Video obtained exclusively by Fox shows federal authorities trying to leave the tense situation, taking on rocks and chunks of concrete, at least one agent injured.
All right, so we're seeing agitators throwing items towards members of law enforcement right now, and they're firing right back. It feels like a war zone out here.
No matter where you stand, you know, I don't think anybody wants to see families ripped apart, right?
This man also hurt, hit by a rubber bullet. What's it like to get hit with one of those?
It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. But it's worth it, I guess. If you're here, you know, for the right cause, it's worth it.
Several people pulled away from the crowd and arrested.
So there's a lot of video of people causing damage and destruction.
Federal investigators now combing through video of these protests, promising more arrests.
Just rest assured the FBI is monitoring everything, and we will find each and every person who damaged and destroyed our federal property or who hurt an officer. We'll come get you. Don't you worry.
Reporting in Paramount, Matthew Seedorf, Fox 11 News.
All right, tensions high around the city tonight. Earlier, right after that report by Matthew, this happened, and Justin was overhead. This is a fire a car that was brought into the intersection of Atlantic and Alondra in Compton, right in front of the Dale's Donuts, if you know where that is. So somebody brought in a Camry, put it in the middle of this intersection, sort of creative, one of those sort of street takeover situations, but then the car was set on fire. And in that time period where we just watched the car burn and burn and burn, it was only then that protesters and Border Patrol agents, they came together at this intersection, and for the longest time, the car just burned until finally the situation was calm enough to allow for the fire department to come in and try to extinguish the fire. But as you see there, the hull of the fire, the shell of the car rather, just sitting there when traffic was started up again, Atlantic and Alondra. But you see that pretty thick skirmish line there of sheriff's deputies, and I believe there were federal agents mixed in that group as well. But it was an incredible scene, something that you don't generally see. Now we've got Justin O'Brien in Skyfox over the current situation. This is in downtown LA, not far away from Little Tokyo and the Federal Building, the Roybal Building. And Justin, weigh in on what you saw with the car fire and then give us an up-to-date situation here.
Yeah, well, earlier there in the Paramount, when we were there, it seemed to be really quietening down. Then all of a sudden, somebody wheeled or drove a Camry into the intersection. It appeared they threw a fireworks inside, opened the driver's door and the back door, and then the car just erupted into flames. The wind actually carried all this huge black smoke over the sheriff deputies who were there, blocking their view, but it was almost a Mad Max type scene, because quickly it became almost like a street takeover where you had guys on motorbikes doing wheelies around the burning vehicle. After about 20 minutes, the LA County Fire came in with protection from the Sheriff's Department, firing pepper balls at the crowd so they could get in. They eventually put out that flame, put out that car. But just to top it off, the sheriff's deputies ended up having to retreat because the crowd set fire to some brush where the sheriff deputies were standing, and they had to retreat, and they went all the way back to the 710. And around just after that, we actually made our way here to the detention center, and there was a peaceful protest during daylight. There were people out on the street. Both lanes were open, cars were driving past, they were waving their flags. But as soon as darkness fell, a crowd turned out here, and they began to amass out front of the building. I'll just ask my pilot, Chris, to give me a look at the front of the building there so we can talk about it. And the crowd got very close to the building. There seemed to be fireworks going off. Unsure whether that was fireworks or stun guns coming from the federal agents inside. But then a short time after that, the gates of the garage opened up, and the Homeland Security agents came out firing tear gas, dispersing the crowd very quickly. Great pictures from Skyfox, but it was a very scary moment for a lot of innocent people there, mainly reporters who were just trying to cover the story there, had to retreat quickly. That caused LAPD, obviously, to come in and take over and clear the streets. But as we saw here, Suze, about 30 minutes ago, the crowd really came out in front of the detention center again, forcing LAPD to come in en masse, to almost corral them in, to try and take them all into custody. We saw about 50 people climb over a brick wall here onto the railway tracks and then make their way into a tunnel. And as I said, I believe that actually tunnel comes out, or that train stops at the Little Tokyo station about a block away. So LAPD believe that's where all those people are. And I think LAPD are just letting them off go into the night now. They have about 10 people up the other end of the street here towards the 101 freeway who they're talking to. Unclear whether they're going to take those guys into custody.
In the course of this newscast, and we of course started at 10 o'clock, we've gone past our typical 11 o'clock finish, but we saw a skirmish line in the downtown area. We saw the skirmish line then go away. LAPD officers got back into their vehicles and left. And then in that short period of time between then and now, there were enough protesters that continued their way to that area that you were just showing us up the federal building and created that situation again where federal agents decided to fire on them with tear gas and flashbangs. And there was enough chaos that it then brought back out the LAPD. Now remember, LAPD, Homeland Security, they're not really working together. LAPD is looking to make sure that the streets of LA stay safe and peaceful. The federal agents have their own agenda. But once again, we see the skirmish line in downtown Los Angeles. This is on Alameda. Is that what we're looking at, Justin?
Yes, that's correct, Sue. This is Alameda. It's one block down from the detention center, and if we tilt up to the top of the screen is the 101 freeway there, and heading off into Union Station. So we've got two skirmish lines here. This is the first line, and then we tilt back down the second line here. There is a little bit of a crowd forming here, unclear whether they are part of any protests. They could actually even be some of those people who ran off onto the train tracks, but it appears that LAPD did not make any arrests, which I find very surprising, considering how quickly they motivated themselves to get in here. But once again, pretty lucky for all those people, Sue, is again, they climbed up those walls and then ran along those tracks. So it looks like the tension is slowly coming down again, the temperature. So I think LAPD will probably stay here for a little longer this time, just to make sure it stays that way.
All right, let's check in with Laura Diaz. Do you agree, Laura, that the temperature has come down since we last spoke with you?
This is Sly Number, a second number I use for privacy. Ever since I
that walked down there that we showed you earlier, and he said that they were peaceful, and he didn't really think that anybody in his crowd, he said they started throwing rocks after they had the tear gas poured on them, and that's what they responded with. Some of the people in the group started throwing the rocks. But right now there are still those black and whites which are securing that area. I just heard a report when they surrounded the people, the protesters who were in the middle, that some of them, in order to escape, they jumped the fence and they went down on the train tracks. And I know that a tweet went out that said they had to stop service on that rail line because those protesters were standing on those train tracks. So, you know, what you're seeing is a lot of people acting under a lot of pressure, a lot of anxiety, and trying to flee. If they had just done what the authorities told them initially, listen, at 9 o'clock tonight, everybody was told to go home. If they didn't go home, they risked being arrested. So now at this late hour, hours after that, you know, call to disperse was given, we still see people coming back into the area, and this is when things can escalate. The irony of it is, even as we're talking to you live and we have still some protesters milling about, we've got the LAPD, we have just regular motorists driving through this intersection. So it's quite a contrast, Susan, of what's going on here tonight. And again, as I was telling you in those earlier reports, it all happens to be where you were standing at the time and what the temperature is of the group, and then what the response back is to whatever action they take. And it's being played out at several areas of Southern California. Certainly downtown has been a hot spot. Earlier today, Paramount was, and people are expressing themselves, and some of them will be arrested for the way they are expressing themselves. Laura Diaz reporting live from downtown, sending it back to you.
All right, Laura, thank you very much. And yes, we saw from Skyfox, what would you say, Justin, about 24 people that jumped the fence, and we saw them running on the tracks there of the Metro Rail? Maybe not as many as two dozen.
I would say a good 24 used the train tracks to get away. That's interesting reporting from Laura that they did shut down the Metro Rail, or the rails, the trains, or stop the trains to make sure that nobody was injured there. What we're looking at here is LAPD just again ready, mounting there just in case they have to roll. This is, I believe, this is exit off the 101 freeway. So skirmish line still here, and we're seeing a steady stream actually of federal agents, vehicles leaving. So maybe they're know that they've called it a night. They're heading home, but certainly it's going to be a bit longer night here for the LAPD officers. They're holding the line here at Temple and Alameda. You can see we've got about 15 vehicles there, LAPD vehicles, and the crowd still here standing on the corner. Now, it's unclear whether any of those people were the people who jumped the train track or jumped the fence there to get onto the train track, but they're certainly hanging out, just waiting to see what's going on. And I'm really unsure. It may just be a night of wait and see for these LAPD officers because these people show no sign that they really want to go home.
Right. But there are far fewer than earlier in the evening. Justin O'Brien, thank you up in Skyfox. We appreciate you. And now we have the mayor of the city of Los Angeles on the line to tell us her point of view. Mayor Karen Bass, thank you for joining us. This situation in the downtown Los Angeles area, what is your take? Are the police handling this correctly? Do you have any objection to the actions of the federal agents today?
Well, let me just say that from what I am looking at and hearing of LAPD, I think the actions have been appropriate. You know, I will always support the right of people to exercise their First Amendment freedom and to have peaceful protest, but the minute that crosses the line into violence, that is unacceptable, and people are going to be held accountable. So people should not be surprised if LAPD moves in to make arrests and you are throwing pieces of concrete or graffitiing up federal property or any private property. It's just unacceptable, and we will not have mayhem in this city.
What about President Trump's decision to bring in 2,000 California National Guard, and also the Secretary of Defense saying that he has put on high alert active Marine members in Camp Pendleton? Do you agree with that move and that promise by the president?
Well, I actually think it is completely unnecessary, and one of the things that I expressed to the administration is that our city has experienced massive civil unrest before. I was here in 1992, and if you want to see it happen again, then you have an extreme presence of troops or law enforcement officers, and that is going to agitate the population. That is not going to solve the problem. So my conversations with the administration today has been an attempt to assure them that if there is protest that break out and if there is violence associated with that protest, that the Los Angeles Police Department is well equipped to handle that. And 2,000 officers, 2,000 soldiers in our city will not be a positive thing and will not be helpful.
What do you know about the people that were arrested in the raids over the last couple of days? Do you know where they are, how they're being treated, if they're being processed appropriately, as the U.S. Attorney Bill Escalation said that they are? Do you feel as if perhaps some of them were arrested erroneously?
Well, let me just tell you that is the problem. We do not know. So one of the appeals I have made to the White House is please allow the lawyers to go in and meet with their clients, meet with the people who were detained. That is what has happened in the past, and so what is going on now is a marked departure from that. That is also something that creates anxiety and tension and fear and anger in the community. When a building, a workplace is being raided, the people inside call their family members rush to the site, they see their family members being taken away, and you can just imagine the grief that is caused because people have no idea where their relatives are being taken. It's my understanding that the people that were detained are in Adelanto now, at the Adelanto facility, and we are trying to get legal representation to those people that were detained so that we can have some information about who they are.
And Mayor, how would you characterize the way you feel about this whole thing? Are you stressed out?
Well, you know, the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, the nation's second city, is a big, second largest city, is a very big job. I am fine. I am very clear, very active, working. I have been doing this nonstop since morning yesterday, 10 o'clock or so in the morning yesterday, and I am going to stick with it until this calms down. But I would just say to the administration, these type of actions Maybe you are arresting some people who were violent criminals or whatever, but these kind of actions where you go to a workplace where people are working in a warehouse, a number of people are taken, it makes it very difficult for people to believe that those people that were arrested were violent criminals, people who are just going to work.
Yeah. How angry are you?
You know what I mean? It's just not. It's not productive for me to be angry. What is productive is for me to be focused, for me to be clear, and for me to be in communication with everyone.
And do you feel like you're getting a good response from the federal side?
Yes, I do feel I'm getting a good response from the federal side. I'm in communication, and as you know, a number of my former colleagues were appointed as major positions in the Trump administration. For example, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem was one of my former colleagues in Congress. I have not spoken with her directly, but arranging to speak with her in the next couple of days. But I have been speaking with representatives of the White House. I've also spoken to Tom Homan to explain to him the dynamics of Los Angeles and to assure him that Los Angeles is not going to tolerate violence. So we don't need 2,000 soldiers to reinforce that. Our law enforcement departments, the LAPD, the sheriffs, etc., are perfectly capable of having a handle on this situation.
And what about Bill Escalation, the U.S. Attorney? Have you had a conversation with him? Because he is pretty steadfast that everything that is being done now by ICE, by Border Patrol, is legal and right.
You know, I've not had an opportunity to meet him. He is new in his position, and I believe he was a relatively new member of the State Assembly. So I've not had an opportunity to meet him, but I will be reaching out to him in the next couple of days.
Okay, and did you see the Truth Social post by President Trump that basically said that you're not doing your job?
Oh, yes, I did. But, you know, that kind of tweets do not move me, let me say. So at the same time tweets are happening, conversations are happening as well.
And what would you say to the president if you had his ear right at this moment?
Well, I would just let him know that Los Angeles is perfectly capable of managing our city. And I would also let him know that these type of raids create, you know, chaos and confusion in our city and are not helpful.
You know, it's interesting. Laura Diaz was in Paramount. She spoke to a number of people that she described as more onlookers than demonstrators, and they all had a very similar sentiment, and that is these are people who just want to feed their family. They want to work, and they want a better life than what they left in their home country. And these kinds of raids, which sort of speaks to what you just said, Mayor, are not helpful and are really not getting the violent criminals that perhaps that was the promise from Homeland Security, et cetera. So,
well, it's just hard for me to believe that there were 30 or 40 hardened criminals in a warehouse going to work every day.
Yeah.
And so that really raises the question of credibility of the administration, and we don't need that either. We don't need people to question the credibility of the administration. We need people to have confidence in government, period. And I think these things, you know, can compromise. You know, when we have a major labor leader arrested like David Huerta, who's a statewide leader, arrested, you know, these kind of things just really create a lot of anger and resentment in the city, and it doesn't really address the primary goal that the administration has.
So far, have you heard from any of your constituents and what they've experienced?
Oh, my. Yes, because, you know, people in the city of Los Angeles are all my constituents. And yes, I have heard from people, and again, the primary concern they want now is, of course, they don't want to see any more raids take place, but they want to be able to have legal access to the people who are detained. People are not sure who's detained. They're not sure why they're detained. They're not sure what's going to happen to them. And you can imagine the fear and terror in a family to not know whether they will ever see their parent or their spouse again.
Indeed. And when you think about the last 4 years, so a lot has been said about the last 4 years and the way the city and the state has conducted itself as a sanctuary city or state. So that is also what a lot of the Trump administration is saying, that you're paying for, or these illegal or undocumented aliens are paying for the fact that the situation had been ignored for 4 years.
Well, let me just say that the policies that we have actually been in place for 45 years. They were initiated by law enforcement many, many years ago because criminals were preying on the undocumented population, and they wanted people, regardless of their citizenship, to be able to report crimes and not be fearful that they would be deported. That's the origin of our laws. So I don't think that you conduct raids as retribution of the fact that some cities or states have sanctuary city or state policies on the books.
But does it feel that way?
Well, you know what I mean? I mean, right now I'm just trying to deal with this to get us back in control and to prevent a further deterioration where it results in violence or fear in our city.
Mayor Karen Bass, thank you so much for your precious time. I know you have a lot of work to do. I know you've been working on this nonstop. I so appreciate your input on what's going on here as we look at our beautiful city of Los Angeles, but clearly at a time period when a lot of people are nervous and a lot of other people say we're just doing our jobs by trying to find these undocumented people. Mayor Karen Bass, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go back to Laura Diaz. She is on the ground. You're Alameda and Temple. Sky Fox was overhead that same corner. Seems like the temperature's really come down.
You know what, Susan, it's really about the same as the last time I spoke to you. There might be fewer people that are assembled here. I think a lot of them are just people who've come to observe. In terms of who may have been arrested, I don't have access to that information. And the black and white still remain there, no sirens. They are securing that area so that you're not able to get north of Temple. But for the most part, people are just milling about, and they all seem to have an opinion about what they think happened in front of the Roybal building. I'm not exactly standing there, so I can only report what I see from afar. But a lot of folks said that they had just come to see what was happening, that they heard about it on social media. They wanted to get a sense of what was happening in this part of the city. And at this point, I think it's just a matter of time until people who've either been arrested are booked, and then other people who've just come to observe, I guess, will just get tired and eventually go home.
All right.
But the dialogue that is happening, I know you just spoke to the mayor, will continue at, dinner tables around the city about what's appropriate. People do have the right to assemble and to demonstrate. They do not have the right to destroy property. And once that line is crossed, that's the point at which the LAPD gets called in. They're not here to act as an arm of the Immigration Service. They're here to keep peace in the city of LA, and they're trying to the best of their ability to do that tonight. Laura Diaz reporting live, sending it back to you.
Laura, thank you. All right, back up to Sky Fox. Justin, what are you seeing now?
Yeah, Susan, these are the officers that we saw drive off in those trucks. They've returned. These are the stragglers. They're actually taking around about 12 to 13 protesters, stragglers into custody here. What they've done, they've closed both of the skirmish lines there that came up, one from Temple and the other from the 101 freeway. They've cornered these people, and now they've got them against the wall there. They're going to slowly search them and take them into custody. They've got them locking him in handcuffs, check his pockets, take his photograph, and put him in the van and take him away for the night. So it looks like they're about, as I said, 12 to 13 people being taken into custody. Other than that, Susan, the Alameda here is very, very quiet as I tilt back up to the area here. We've got a little bit of a crowd on the opposite side of the street there, but this LAPD crew, there's officers there, about 15 cars, 30 officers standing there, and it looks like this thing is slowly coming to an end tonight at just before midnight.
All right, and again, you count how many people do you think will be in custody shortly?
I tried to count them as they were walking away. I thought I counted 13. So if we're talking about that people taken into custody before, the estimated was 10. So we're looking at around about 24, 25 people taken into custody tonight out here in front of the Royal Boyle building, the Federal Detention Center.
Yeah, and right alongside the metro rail tracks, and we were talking about that, Justin, because we watched as some people jumped the fence and ran alongside the rail, and I don't have much knowledge about third rails. I know that we talk a lot about them when it comes to the New York subway, but I did look it up, and it does say that those rails are electrified, 650 to 750 megahertz. And yes, it's dangerous to touch one. You could, in fact, be electrified or even electrocuted. So it was interesting indeed to see people running alongside them and jumping over the rails. Laura mentioned the fact that she had gotten word or seen a tweet that suggested that Metro Rail was aware of the fact that some of the protesters or people were running alongside the track, so they stopped train traffic, and official train traffic ends at midnight. And Justin, we're seeing there a gentleman, he is now fully in custody. Are they using, can you tell whether or not they're using like handcuffs or just those zip tie type things?
Yeah, so I think it's zip ties. I've seen the officers have zip ties in their back pockets. If we pan around here, you might see some of them have them there. So, yeah, they're putting the zip ties on them. And there may actually just be issued a letter to appear in court because it is just a protest. No serious crimes committed here when you talk about a civil disobedience. Right. So you don't normally spend the night in jail for that, Suze. Okay. So, look, again, about 25 people taken into custody tonight.
Indeed. Yeah, we've seen this before with the social justice marches during George Floyd and what have you. We want to thank you for joining us on this extended version of the Fox 11 News at 10. We will, of course, be keeping.
Think Michigan roads and